We're counting down the biggest stories of the year in Nebraska agriculture, including beef exports to China. We'll learn why some say progress is slow. Plus, a local farm family finds the answer to fertilizer prices by producing their own, and how farmers can be part of the solution on greenhouse gas emissions while finding a new market. That and so much more. It's time to grow. Nebraska cattlemen taste success as China tastes Nebraska beef. And as the year comes to a close, Nebraska leads the way with more than half of the U.S. beef exports to China. But there are more regulatory hurdles to clear, and that's our top story.
All over the country.
Around the country and around the globe, a Dawson County cattleman celebrates when Nebraska beef opens doors, as Craig Uden witnessed firsthand this year in China.
It's a slow opening, okay?
Uden cautions trade with China is a work in progress, worth the effort.
1.4 billion people. There's over 350 million in middle and upper class. And what's really exciting about the Chinese deal is these middle and upper class citizens over there are 20 to 40 years old. They're more westernized in their thinking and their diet.
In the dozen years American beef was absent, countries like Australia gained ground. And as the U.S. plays catch-up, only cattle of a certain age are allowed. There are also limits on feed additives, and certain parts of the carcass cannot be used, all factors limiting exports.
The big thing, though, is the supply. Those are cattle that they have a lot of restrictions on it, and there's not the availability out there.
As a top state for both cattle feeding and processing, Craig Uden says it's a start.
As we crawl, then we'll walk, then we'll run.
He points to South Korea. It resumed importing U.S. beef in 2012, and 5 years later is a billion-dollar market. And one state has positioned itself above all others to capitalize.
Making sure that Nebraska and beef are two words that go together.
Craig Uden cut the ceremonial prime rib and believes it's the first of many Nebraska beef products to be enjoyed in China. So far, that country has imported $17 million worth of American beef, half of that from Nebraska. And cattlemen say it's just the start.
The success of Nebraska beef to China was a big story, but was it the biggest? Other than the poor farm economy that continues to overshadow everything, we narrowed down our list of top Nebraska farm and ranch stories. The results are in, and it looks like a nearly tie vote for third and fourth place. Greg Ibaugh heads to the USDA and poultry expansion. Beef to China comes in second, and the top story in Nebraska agriculture, you say the challenges in the growing season. Whether it was concerns about dicamba or weeds like palmer or the extreme winds at harvest, you rank that as the biggest egg story in Nebraska for 2017. Farmers learn about leaving a legacy for the next generation. Central Community College has an egg program. They're also reaching out to the farm community with workshops, like one focused on farm transition planning. Attorneys who specialize in the area say it can be tough to navigate the financial and emotional decisions.
The goal is to make sure that the family continues being able to celebrate the holidays together and come around one big table year after year, and that's where we come in. If you do planning in the forefront, what you're really doing is eliminating a lot of those issues and problems and the conflict that might come up in the future if proper planning isn't implemented.
Attorneys encourage farm families to act sooner rather than later and say it's okay not to have all the answers, but never too early to start planning. And the estate tax, one of the things we're watching in that federal tax relief bill. Nebraska Farm Bureau is watching to see how the House and Senate bills come together. They want farmers to be able to deduct their state and local taxes on their federal income taxes. But for some, the big issue is the estate tax, sometimes called the death tax.
You look at the value of where ag land continues to be in this state, and you have a lot of farmers and ranchers that may on paper seem to have quite a large estate, which is true. However, when you look at the income side of things, that doesn't always translate back to a cash side of things. It's a heavy asset versus cash poor type of situation. And so you have farmers and ranchers that spend an awful lot of money, not just on the tax itself, but also preparing their estates and going through the estate planning process to make sure that those estates that they have created, those farms and ranches that are family-owned, family-oriented, in a lot of ways can stay in that family.
A petition drive may begin soon to force the issue of tax relief. A group calling itself Reform for Nebraska's Future tells NTV they are working with the Secretary of State's office on the wording. Meanwhile, State Senator Steve Erdman says he will introduce the plan in the legislature as well. In his words, common sense isn't so common at the state capitol.
I don't think that will happen, so we're going to do, the citizens are going to put a petition drive together, and they will seek to get signatures to put it on the ballot in November of 18. And then when they vote on that, the citizens vote on that and put that in place, then the legislature will be forced to make a decision.
Erdman says it would help the state's farmers and ranchers, but the governor has told NTV it's a fantasy that would require $1 billion in budget cuts. The beef state continues to embrace other livestock opportunities. Hendricks Isa works to improve the genetics of egg-laying hens. Between their $18 million facility in Grand Island and around a dozen barns they've contracted with to build on area farms, it's an impact of $40 million. Hendricks was approved for $600,000 in local Grand Island taxpayer incentives.
We're very good in agriculture. We have been, and that's what got us to where we're at, and we'll never turn our back on it. So we continue to recruit in that area.
Another area of success, transportation. The Grand Island City Council this week approved the annual funding for the program. Later, turning corn stover into electricity. Later, why one local farm family is adding hogs to diversify. Stay with us.